Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome, peace to you. We're glad that you're here today for our second day of our conference, Making Jesus Known Among Muslims. We had a great beginning last night. I hope you put your track shoes on this morning and you're all caffeinated and ready to go because we had just some great teaching last night. We're looking forward to some great time together today. So we're going to have some more great teaching. We got a great panel discussion coming up. And then this afternoon, some great workshops. So if you haven't had an opportunity to pick up one of the flyers and look through the workshops, you want to do that so that after lunch, a delicious lunch. Pastor George said, "Oh, don't overstate it, but delicious North African lunch." And so then we're going to have our workshop. So that's going to be an exciting time. So we're glad that you're here. Let's stand. I'm going to open with prayer, and then Kevin's going to lead us in a couple of worship songs. Father, we thank you for this day. This is a day that you have made. We rejoice and we're glad in it. That you've given us the privilege of being together this morning. We thank you for opportunity to learn and to be challenged in our own faith, and then also a challenge to be bold in our witness for you. Your word says that if Christ be lifted up, he'll draw all men to himself. And that's our objective. It's not to lift us up, but to lift you up and lift up the Lord Jesus Christ and to honor him. So we ask your spirit would be upon us today, that you would protect us, that you would put an umbrella over us. We bind Satan from this place. We bind Satan from all of our work. And we know that he that is in us is greater than he that's in the world. And we claim that power in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.
You want to pull your guitars?
sing over songs called The Lily of the Valley. Jesus is everything to me. He's the fairest of 10,000 to my soul. The lily I see. I need to and make it fully whole. It's sorrow is my lover, and trouble is my shame. He tells me everything I need to know. He's the lily of the valley, the bright morning star. He's a favorite song, 10,000 to my soul. He all my grief has taken, and all my sorrows moved. And temptation is my soul, my tongue. Fall for him, forsake all my friends, Lord. He keeps me by his side. The world will see me as tempted me sore. Through Jesus I shall safely reach the Lord.
How about that?
Please, you have to be in the state in order for people online to hear you, please.
He says you have to be at that one for people to hear you.
Okay, yeah, I know that.
I know.
Sorry for that.
That work? Okay. All right. Well, as you came in to the church, you couldn't help but notice that there's some ministry tables out on the floor. And we're delighted to have a number of different ministries here to share and their ministry and what God is doing in and through them. As I mentioned earlier, I serve at East West Ministries. East West is a mission organization based in Plano, Texas. Our vision is to multiply followers of Jesus among unreached people in the spiritually darkest places. And that's defined as no church, no Bible, and very few believers. And our mission is to equip the church to evangelize, to disciple, to equip, and to send, and to plant churches among those unreached people. So I've asked each of the mission table people to come forward, and they're just going to give a brief overview of introduction of who they are. And well, Elizabeth, come on up, Mark, Lisa, Roy, and we're going to ask them just to kind of share a little bit, Pastor George. All right, so Roy, you're first up on the platform, so take it away.
I'm Roy Oxenmod, and we moved here to the Minneapolis area a year and a half ago. We started CAMA, Coalition of Ministries to Muslims in North America, back in 1999. We would like to start a CAMA group here in the Minneapolis area. We have a sign-up sheet, because what we'd like to do is to create a community where we get together quarterly to learn from one another and have a growing community rather than something just once a year. Also, we happen to have the Jesus Film cards there, and on the back is the QR code. We use this for evangelism. It has everybody's language. Come and take them. Those things are for free.
Watch your step.
Hi, I'm Mark Anand, and I'm with Street Level Ministry. And Street Level's been around for about, I think, 28 years. It started with Scott Colson at a Billy Graham thing. He was sharing his testimony or something, and a guy afterwards asked him, "Hey, could you take me out to the street and teach me how to do the street ministry thing?" And he said, "Sure." So they went out, and it went so well that they went, I think, the next week and the next week and the next week. And now it's 28 years later, we're still going out. And we do festivals. We go put up a prayer booth at the festival, share the gospel there. We go, we have a Muslim track, I guess you could call it, every Friday night that goes out. And also I go out to places like McDonald's and do my little magic tricks and stuff like that, you know, and try to share the gospel in creative ways, you know, whatever ways that God has gifted us. So we give out literature, we do seminars for free. Bring us to your church, and we'll do a seminar for you on evangelism. But we just love to share the gospel in as many ways as you can imagine. So thank you.
He's a pretty bright guy, isn't he?
George Saeed, who is Ministry to Muslims and M2M Network. We partner here locally with Street Level Outreach to put this conference together and other events. But we have a table outside with great resources. Most of these books we have in the table you cannot buy online, you cannot find online. We encourage you to be, because the conference is not going to teach you every single thing. And I really also encourage you to go to our channel later on, watch what Dr. J say again with slow motion, little bit. It was so much amazing information. You're going to need to go back and take notes and stuff. But also, YouTube, we have a lot of different speakers, great speakers teaching on different topics like the Trinity. Our goal and purpose is to equip the body of Christ to reach out to the Muslims effectively locally. I would love to see you later at the table. God bless you guys.
I'm Elizabeth Biggie with Crescent Project, and yes, I'm shorter than a lot of these people. And Crescent Project wants to see every Muslim have a chance to respond to the gospel and be connected with a follower of Jesus. And so what that looks like for Crescent Project is training and equipping believers to know, how can I connect with Muslims, whether it's your neighbors, your coworkers, your friends, or through online outreach, which I'm a big part of. If you've got a phone in your pocket, you could be online talking to Muslims who are in closed countries where it's not legal for them to get their hands on a Bible. But I've read the whole Gospel of Matthew with my friend in Yemen just because she wanted to make a friend who spoke English and was curious about what I believe. So we can help you to have conversations like that. We also have church planting initiatives going on. Women's ministry, helping women reach out to Muslim women, and so on. So that is us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I'm late. I got turned around and I made it. Praise God. I'm Jerry Rosamond. I'm with Time to Revive. Some of you probably heard of that. They came here in 2014, 11 years ago. I started full-time 7 years ago. And Time to Revive is all about equipping the body of Christ to share the gospel and make disciples. And you might have seen the little wristband, the table with the wristbands and the blue Bibles, English and Spanish. They're like the Romans Road, just to take someone through the gospel. It's a simple tool. And in the back, there's some discipleship information to start discipling people. And I have a resource for discipleship too. You can take a book if you want one. We were just in the south side of Chicago 2.5 weeks ago, and we gave away 3,500 pairs of Nike Air Jordan shoes. I don't know if I said that right, but people came to the tent, and we had probably 4,000 people from the south side of Chicago, Inglewood and back of the yards. And over 400 people from 21 states came and 2 countries. And God is just opening doors. There was 1,000 people that signed up for discipleship for a year. And through a guy that came from Nigeria, that's possibly opening a door for west side of Chicago this fall. So God is just moving, and we're also in 99 countries through a thing called Revive School, which is online, and groups have been starting it all over the country in the last 6 or 7 years. So God is just moving, and would love to have you participate. I live in Victoria, so I'm local. Would love to meet any of you. God bless. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Isa Isaac. I'm with El Masira, which means the journey. I'm here with Lois and Lou. There are more local here. I live in Knoxville, Tennessee. But El Masira, or the journey, is a 13-episode series about Christ and the Trinity from the Old Testament. So the top 3 questions that our Muslim friends ask: why is Jesus God? Why do we believe in the Trinity? And why did Jesus have to die? And oftentimes we give them answers from the New Testament, but they're like, well, what about the Old Testament? Why isn't it telling the same story? So in Al Masira, we have the first 6 episodes that show the references of the Old Testament about the Trinity, the divinity, and the deity of Christ, and his, I'll emphasize, eternity, being there from creation or even before. So that when we get to the episodes of the Messiah and the Father, the Messiah and the Holy Spirit, we take these Old Testament references and we show them why we believe in the Trinity, why Jesus is divine, why he is eternal, why we believe in the Trinity. It's kind of apologetics. We were talking last night about polemics and apologetics. It's kind of a, why do we believe from the Bible what we believe? Now, I have to give a shout out for the Crescent Project and the embassy, the Christian embassy, because they do a lot of work online and they do reach people in closed countries. And I know a lot of them use Al Masira for that purpose, to show the divinity and eternity of Christ. We have a table in the hallway. Please come stop by and see how you can participate and be part of our team. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. So take the time to stop by and get some information. There's also a lot of great information. You know, am on many of their websites, and so I get periodic updates. I found it just helped me grounded to stay in touch with those things. So I also subscribe to like Voice of the Martyrs, Timothy Initiative, Nexus, Mission Nexus, and other organizations, just to know what's going on in the world. It's easy. We have a tremendous opportunity here in Minneapolis. Over there, someone said, I learned a couple months ago that there are almost 400 people groups in the world, and nearly 350 of them are represented here in the Twin Cities. So we can't go to all the nations, but God has brought the nations to us. But still, we need to have a global vision, because there's so much opportunity out there. So talk to these people, get some information, get on their website. I want to go back to Amasia and Isa. One of the things that we're praying about is this fall to bring a training event to the Twin Cities. We already have the venue reserved. We have the support, one of our great churches in the Twin Cities. And so we're hoping to do that. So please leave your name with Lois and Louie, so that when we get to that point, we can contact you and let you know if that's something that you would like to be a part of. So again, thank you to our ministry table leaders. So we're looking forward to a great time of teaching this morning. We had a great introduction last night from Dr. Smith. And, my granddaughter, she's 5 years old. When she goes to Sunday school, I always say, okay, well, what was the Sunday school story about? She says, well, Papa, the big idea was, so it says the big idea. There's a lot of information. And so this is my takeaway. The big idea was that everything that we know about Muhammad was written hundreds of years after he was gone. And the things that we know about Jesus was written within 70, 75 years from the time Jesus was here. And I keep going back to John's first letter. He says, the things that we have seen and heard and touched, we declare unto you. They were eyewitnesses, and they were right there, and they knew Jesus. And so that was my big takeaway. So I hope that's what I got. Hopefully too as well. So, but Dr. Smith is going to come this morning, and he's going to talk about introducing the historical critique. So let's welcome Dr. Smith.
Okay, if we can get that up there you go. I don't want people to look at me. I don't want you to follow me. I want you to follow the screens. Just put your pens down. You're not going to keep up. Just like yesterday, I'm going to go lickety-split. I've been only given an hour. This usually takes me 16 hours to get through this material. So let's see if we can get it in 1 hour. Now, yesterday we shut down Muhammad. Today we're going to shut down Mecca and the Quran. And I mean that, historically speaking. We're going to show that there was no Mecca. Mecca really was what we should have started with. Do I have a clicker up here? Can I get a clicker? Stephen?
Is it up there?
Oh, here it is. Okay.
Right side, that's an off switch.
Yeah. And I assume I am on.
Green.
Says green. We try it? There we go. All right. So Mecca is really what we should have started with yesterday, because once you shut down Mecca, I don't care what Muhammad you find. If he's not from Mecca, boom, who cares? You've got to have a Muhammad that lives in a place called Mecca, receiving a book called the Quran between 610 and 632, right? That's what everybody says. So if there's no Mecca, that shuts down Muhammad. It also shuts down the Quran. So let's start with Mecca. It's so easy. You can go very quick through it, and it's so visual. But I'm not going to go through all my slides. I'm just going to do a quick review so you can see where we're heading. Why is it important? If there is, didn't I just say that? I'm just repeating myself. It doesn't matter what Muhammad or Mahmud. Notice we're talking about Muhammad now, because there is no Muhammad in the 7th century, because there are no vowels in the 7th century. Therefore, it is Muhammad, and we all know who Muhammad is. How many people not know who Muhammad is? Or who knows who Muhammad is now? Just raise your hand. All right, about half of you. Well, for those who don't know who Muhammad is, it's really Jesus Christ. We're finding that is the name given to Jesus Christ in Syriac, also in Hebrew, and also in Arabic, from which the two others derives its alphabet from. So In 1995, we almost had no evidence. Back then, when I did my first debate with Dr. Joan Badawi there at Oxford in Cambridge University in 1995, August, I had no real evidence to support what I'm going to do today. And his response was, the absence of evidence does not prove the evidence of absence, which is true. I didn't have any of the evidence, but that was 1995. We're 30 years later. Today, I'm going to show you piece after piece of evidence. We saw already yesterday the coins. We showed you the coins yesterday. We showed you the inscriptions. Is that not evidence that there is no Muhammad, that the Muhammad or the Muhammad that is there is Jesus Christ because of the crosses on the other side of the coin? Even the references in the inscriptions with the cross at the top to show that this is not a Muslim Muhammad, and it's also not somebody from Arabia, from the Hijaz, Mecca or Medina. So knowing that, today we have completely changed the debate. We now have the evidence. So we're not asking for the absence of evidence. That was what I was demanding and I was stuck with in 1995. Now today we do have the evidence. Who therefore has no evidence? It's the Muslims that have no evidence. For one book, one man, and one place. The book is the Quran, the man is Muhammad, and the place is Mecca. Mecca is so important. Why? Well, just take a stool with 3 legs. Those are the 3 legs of which Islam is dependent on. They're dependent on one book, one man, and one place. The books of the Quran, the man is Muhammad, and the place is Mecca. If you start to attack one of those legs and it starts to wobble, and finally it starts to fall, the other 2 come with it. So that's why we're confronting the very foundations of Islam. And what I'm going to do today is shut down all 3. The easiest one is to do with Mecca, and that's why we go first. Now, if we eradicate Mecca, obviously there is no Muhammad and there is no Islamic Quran. So what they claim, and this is what they claim that Mecca is the oldest city. How do we know that? Because in chapter 7, verse 24, Adam and Eve are up in space in the Garden of Eden. It's up in space. They have eaten of the forbidden fruit, much like our own story, and they're thrown out of the Garden of Eden. And Eve is not according to the Quran. It just says they're thrown down to earth. But if you look at the traditions, we know that Eve is thrown down to Mecca. And Adam is thrown down to Sri Lanka. Don't worry, Adam was 90 feet tall, so he just went boom, 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 and went and joined his wife up in Mecca. That's what the traditions tell us. And by the fact that you're laughing, you don't believe that. Nonetheless, that is what the Muslims believe. Unfortunately, they have to believe that because they have no other recourse. So we're going to help them out today. That's, we now know, if that is the case, and both of them are in Mecca, what does that say Mecca is? Well, to me, it says it's the oldest city in history, because you have to have people in a city. If there were no one before Adam and Eve, and that's where they're at, that would make it the oldest city in mankind. We do know in chapter 21 that Abraham is there. Now, it does never say Mecca in the Quran. It says the Masjid al-Haram, which means the forbidden place of bowing, which Muslims today believe is the Kaaba. He's rebuilding the Kaaba there in not Mecca, it's just the city of the Prophet. Only once in the entire Quran does it mention the word Mecca. Isn't that interesting? If it's the oldest city in history, if it's the city where Abraham was rebuilding the Kaaba, then certainly someone somewhere should have known about it. We don't have any reference anywhere of anybody knowing about it at all, as you're going to see. But we do know, according to the traditions, that it was at the center of trade, north, south, east, and west, and that's why it became famous. That's why Muhammad became famous, because he was a trader there in that city. So it should be the best known and best documented place on earth, you would think, right? If you look at the Quran, there's reference after reference of the place of the Prophet. It doesn't say Mecca, which to me is curious. We know that this place of the Prophet is the mother of the settlement of all settlements. It's the first sanctuary in chapter 3. The mother of all settlements in chapter 6 and chapter 42. Adam and Eve were cast down there in chapter 7, where Abraham lived in chapter 21. It was where Muhammad was born according to traditions and lived there until 622 when he then moved up to Medina. It is where the Qibla is directed to from Dan Gibson's material. And it's also referred to in chapter 2. Again, always it's the Masjid al-Haram. Masjid al-Haram, the forbidden place of bowing, which could be anywhere. And as we're now finding, the Masjid al-Haram is really the temple in Jerusalem. Every time you see that in the Quran, that's Jerusalem, but that's for another day, that's for another time. So the above imply that they lived there from the very beginning. There's only one reference to Mecca in the Quran, that's in chapter 48, verse 24. For such an important city, that is, something's going on there. But when you look at the traditions, now you saw yesterday that all the traditions don't begin to appear until the 11th century. So that's 400 years after Muhammad, and they continue up until the 16th century. right? That's 400 to 900 years later. And you did a comparison and you got it off by 15 years. It's not 75 years, it's 60 years. Everything is written down, all right? So we have a much better course to go back to because we can know that everything exists and everything we need to know about our tafsir, our tahqiq, our hira, sirah, and our hadith comes within 60 years of Christ. They have to go to 400 to 900 years later. Knowing that, let's now look at those traditions. So by the 11th century, Mecca is well known. But take a look at what they say about Mecca. And this is what's curious, that it has streams, it has fields, it has trees, grass, fruit, clay, grapes, grains, pomegranates. Is that what Mecca looks like? Take a look at the pictures up there. Does Mecca look that fertile? That it has mountains overlooking the Kaaba? You can see even the references in the traditions to this Mecca has problems because it's not the Mecca we see today. Mecca is not in a valley. Its nearest mountains are 2 miles away. It has none of these vegetations listed above because it is a desert. So it's too arid and dry to support any of the above, according to the modern soil studies. So in the Quran, Mecca is only referred to as the place of the prophet, but in the 9th to 10th century traditions, it portrays it, suggests that the authors lived much, much further north. Hold on to that. Now let's get into some conclusion. You already heard that conclusion. Let's get to the next one. Since Mecca is the earliest and most important city in the history of mankind, it has to be the center of the world and therefore certainly the best known. That's what we're asking. Why is it no one has heard of it? Reference suggests that Mecca has less vegetation, grass, cranes, streams, yet it's in a desert. Just look at a map. Go there. You'll see it's always been in a desert. When you look at the Quran itself, when you look at the Arabic in the Quran, you can see that this is Nabatean Aramaic Arabic. That is not Sabaic Arabic. Sabaic Arabic is what they would have spoken in the Hijaz, in Mecca, Medina. And I mentioned this yesterday. Looking at the Arabic, you will see the Ta Marbuta, the Alif Maksura, the definite article. These exist in the Quran. They are not found in that part of the world. They are only found way up north into what is today Petra. And that's why it's Nabatean. So even the Quran itself belies its fact that it could have come from Mecca. The Arabic words use endings that I just said that are Nabatean. Did I just say? Yeah. Now, what's important is when you look at it geographically, it mentions 65 geographical names. Over and over again, it talks about these places where this prophet, doesn't name the prophet, just as these places where this prophet has contact with. And always it has contact with these people, 23 times these people from Ad, 24 times these people from Thamud, and 7 times these people from Midian. Take a look and see where that is. I don't know if this works or not, but it doesn't work. So if you look, here we go. I'll use this guy. So look up here. There is Ad, there is Thamud, there is Midian, here is Mecca way down here. There's 600 miles between the two. How did this prophet have daily content going up and down to these people from Thamud, these people from Midian, going 600 miles up and 600 miles down in the same day? Not on Kabul, you do. It would take a helicopter or an airplane. I don't recall any helicopters or airplanes in the 7th century. So you can see, obviously, whoever was writing the Quran and was talking about these people had to have been living in that part of the world where all these people lived. Just the geography shows you that. When you look at the references themselves, when you look in the 7th century and look at who these Arabs were, these Arabs that were conquering the whole part of the world, these Arabs who eventually become Muslims, but what did they call themselves in the 7th century? The Umayyads. Mu'awiyah, Abdul Malik. Who are they? What are these people? Well, they refer to themselves in 5 different references. They call themselves Hagarines because they're in the line of Hagar. They call themselves Ishmaelites because they're, again, the son of Hagar. They call themselves Muhajirun, means people of Hagar. They call themselves Hagriites, which means the place of Hagar. In every case, they're Ishmaelites who come in the line of Hagar. They come from the slave of Abraham. All of them are Ishmaelites. Nowhere do you find any reference to anybody called Muslims at all. You can't find any documentation at all in the 7th century. Not until well into the 8th century, until 730. That's 100 years after Muhammad existed. And I'm going to say what Clint always, if he ever existed. Thank you for putting those out there. He apologized afterwards. I said, don't apologize. You have to put that now as a footnote. But can you see the problem, folks? If this word Muslim or this word Islam doesn't even come into documentation for 100 years and well into the 8th century, then you've got to ask, who are these people? Look and see who they are. Look and see what they were doing. Mecca is where Muslims contend that between 70 to 300 prophets are buried. Now, folks, if they're buried there, it says they're buried in a praying position because their bodies never deteriorate. If that is so, then they should still be there today. Take a look at all the buildings that are being built all around Mecca. You will see they're building 62 skyscrapers. The one that you see there, that huge clock tower, it is the 4th highest building in the world. When you build buildings that high, you have to dig deep foundations. When you look at those deep foundations, you're going to come across all kinds of bodies, right? What have they found? Not a thing. Dan Gibson, who some of you know, a friend of mine, was at a conference in Dubai, and he was sitting with some of the archaeologists there from Saudi Arabia. He went to their table purposely to ask them the questions. You are archaeologists. Whenever there is a big building project, the first thing you do is you show up, because if you're making huge buildings, you have to dig deep foundations, and as you dig, you start bringing up all kinds of artifacts, and that's how you recreate the history of the city. And that's why archaeologists always go to where the big buildings are being built. And they said, all these buildings, 62 of them that you're building around the Kaaba, what have you found? They didn't want to answer him. So he insisted, tell me what you found. He says, well, we have found the remains of an Ottoman fort from 1299. AD, not BC, AD. That's the earliest object they've been able to find. Do you see what's going on, folks? This has become such a problem that are now cementing. Take a look at that picture. They're cementing up Mecca. And notice, if you look carefully up here, you can't have to get the slide. You all get this. Don't worry afterwards. There's Khadija's house. That's the wife of Muhammad. They've destroyed her house and are rebuilding a hotel over top of it. Right in the center is Muhammad's birthplace. They've destroyed Muhammad's birthplace and are building a hotel over top of it. Why are they destroying all these historical buildings unless they know what we know? They do not come from the 7th century. They were built much, much later, possibly only 300 years ago. That's why they have to shut this stuff down before the rest of the world finds out. And it makes my job that much easier, and your jobs as well. So, conclusion number 4. When we ask the surrounding civilizations, and this is what Dr. Patricia Corona, who reads and writes 15 languages, she was my supervisor when I started my doctorate. She was the one that went around to all these different civilizations. She went to the Assyrians. She went to the Persians. She went to Babylonians. She went to the Romans. She went to the Himyarites. She went to the Asherites. She went to the Nubians. She went to the Nabateans. All of these different civilizations, you can see them all circled in red. All those civilizations directly surrounding Mecca. And she read all their original material from the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, all the way up into the 8th century. There was not one reference to Mecca in any of them. Not until the 8th century, until 741. That is well 100 years after Muhammad even lived. The first reference you can find to a place called Mecca. Folks, the comeback was, well, maybe this Mecca was so unimportant that no one bothered to talk about it. So she said, okay, let's do one step further. Let's go to all these other towns, these oases that surround Mecca. So she went to all these different towns, starting with Aden, and then she went to Najran, and then to Sana'a, and then she went to Taif, and then she went to Tabuk, and to Yathrib, then Tabuk, then she went on up to Gaza. All of these little towns, most of them are just little oases, maybe 200 people in them, to see if anybody had heard of them. She could find reference after reference for every one of these places, all the way back to the 4th century BC. But not one reference to Mecca. Are you starting to get an idea of what's happening here, folks? It looks like it doesn't matter what historical question you ask about Mecca if it just doesn't exist. So when noting the trade routes, because this is what we've been told, that all the trade routes go right through Mecca, and that's what aggrandized Mecca, and that's why Muhammad became famous, and that's why he became rich. So she went to all the trade routes, which she could read because she looked at all the documentation. And according to the Islamic the standard Islamic narrative, all the trade went from Aden in the south up to Najran, Sana'a, up to Taif, down to Mecca, up to Yathrib. You notice I say down and up? Because look at a map, you can see it's way down 3,000 feet from Taif. It's not even on the western plateau where all the aquifers are, where all the water is, where all the oases are. And these are all oases. So she said, well, that's curious. Why is it that you have to go down from Taif, down 3,000 feet to a place that had no water? How could you therefore water your camels? And then they had to go 3,000 feet up to Yathrib again. She said, why anybody ask that question? So she decided to find where the trade did go. Since it didn't go that direction, she said, decided where it went. And folks, you know where it went. Just take a look at the map again. What do you see on the left, on the west side of Arabia? You see the Red Sea. All the trade went was maritime. There was hardly any trade went by land because it was too expensive. If you take a ton of goods and just take it 50 miles by land, you can take that same ton of goods for 1,250 miles by sea. That's why we still do it today. And there's no reason. Now, if you go by land, you've got to protect your camels. You've got to protect your good. There could be robbers behind any sand dune. You go by water, you can see them miles away. And if you see pirates coming, you just go into a cove and you protect yourself. You can't do that on the deserts. That's why everything was done by sea. And she went and looked at all the trading documents and found that none of them had Mecca. They all had Eritrea. Eritrea. Agilis is the city that they all talked about, which is in Eritrea today. Are you from Eritrea? Oh, you're just next to it. We're close to where you are. Because there's also Sawakin is from Sudan. That's also on the trade route. So you have two cities that were on the same trade route. And they're all in your country and in Eritrea. And why were they in your country? Because you had water. It's as simple as that. You go on the eastern coast of the Red Sea, there's no water. There's no places for any boats to hole up at night. So that's why all the trade was on the western coast, along the African coast. Now, one woman was able to shut this down. Why is it that this was never done before? Because Muslims aren't asking this question. Neither the land trade routes or the Red Sea trade routes along the East African coast supports an early Mecca, proving that none of the trade went via Mecca at all, confronting the notion that it was the center of the trade. And you can see on the map on the left there, on the upper left, take a look at the yellow trade route. There it is. The trade routes are all hugging the African coast. For one very simple reason. I'll get to that. Now, before 741, that's the first time that any documentation has come for this place. It's called the Continuato Byzantia Arabica. It was written in Greek. It's the first place that ever names a city called Mecca. It was dated to 741, but looks where it's placed on the map. That Mecca is in southern Turkey. Over 1,000 miles too far to the north. So even the first documentation we have for it is 1,000 miles in the wrong direction. When Ptolemy put together his Geography of Arabia, now there have been 7 maps done just looking at Ptolemy's work from the 2nd century AD. So this is long before Arabia was, before Islam was created. He looked and he saw all the references he could find for all the different places all around Arabia. No reference to Mecca at all. Not one reference to Mecca. For one very good reason. It just didn't exist. Not in the 2nd century AD. And the reason is very simple. I did this back in 2019. I went down to Speaker's Corner and I held up this picture here. I held up 4 pictures of Arabia. I said, folks, take a look. What do you see here? Look where Mecca is. It's surrounded by a desert. Where there's no desert, there's no water, no food, no people, no towns, no cities, no cities, no civilization, no history. That's it. Bingo. You need one piece of evidence. You need just one thing, and that's called water. You have to have water to live. You have to have water to have vegetation. You have to have water to have humans to live there. You have to have water to have civilization. Bingo, where'd that come from? He was so surprised he jumped off the comment. That's how easy it is. How long did it take me to say that? 5 seconds. No water, no food, no people, no towns, no cities, no cities, no history, no civilization. It's as simple as that. You've got to have water. And if you just show that, and I put that up to it so the whole crowd could see. And every time they started coming back to me, and every time they started saying, well, yes, but we do know that when he was in Mecca, I said, hold on, Mecca has no water. Oh, yeah, that's right. It became the meme that I used everywhere. And you can use it. It's as simple as that. Once you say that phrase, no water, no food, no people, no towns, city, no civilization, no history. Once you say that, it takes 5 seconds, maybe for you, maybe 10 seconds. Once you say that once, you don't have to say it a second time. Because that shuts down every argument. That shuts down every argument. We didn't have time to do that yesterday. Otherwise, I'd have done that with Mecca yesterday, Terrence. So that's such an easy way to shut down that argument. But can you see how easy this is, folks? Despite the Muslims' claim, now we'll come back to you, yes, but what about the Zamzam well? And I'll say, hold on a minute. The Zamzam well is only 30 feet across and 50 feet deep. Are you saying that that is what saved the world and that's what saved Islam? And that's why today over 1 billion people drink from that well? And they say, yes, because of Allah. Allah has provided. It is inexhaustible water is what they'll tell you. This is the miracle of Allah. And I say, okay, let's check this out. So you could do this. I went up on Google and I just wanted to find out where all this water came from that well. And when you look at that, you'll see that it's been capped in 1953, and then in 1963 it's been put underground. And then there are pipes going into the well and pipes coming out. You can go and see them. The pipes are there. Follow the pipes. The pipes go up to these big holding tanks up on the mountains about 2 miles away. 11 of them that are the world's largest holding tanks full of water, all made by the United Kingdom. Those pipes, those holding tanks go way down to Jeddah, 35 miles away, down to the Red Sea. And when you get down there, what do you see? Well, you see these buildings. These are called desalination plants. There are 27 of these desalination plants all around Saudi Arabia. When you look at the ones, they have 7 of them in Jeddah alone. That is where the water comes that fills the Zamzam well. So this has nothing to do with Allah. It has to do with Bechtel Corporation, Kansas City, United States. Thank God for the Americans. Can you see why you need to shut this argument down? And that's why you need to go back and look and just follow it through. Now, there was such a problem even in the 9th century that the Queen Zubaydah had created an aqueduct that is still there today. But where does the water come from? From Taif, up on the mountains, up on where all the aquifers are. Now, Muslims have no idea where the earliest Qiblas are. And that's why Dan Gibson has done such a great job going to over 100 Qiblas of 100 mosques from as far away as China, although that one's in doubt, going down to India, going to Turkey, going down to Yemen, all around Arabia. And every one of the Qiblas is either facing 2 directions. They're either facing Petra or Jerusalem. If they are temples, they're facing Jerusalem. If they are a Nabatean temple, if they're synagogues, they're facing Jerusalem. If they're Nabatean temples, they're facing Petra. Not one of them is facing Mecca. Not at all. Not in the 6th century, 5th century, 4th century, not in the 7th century, not until 715, the first mosque that we've been able to find that faces Mecca. 715 is well into the 8th century, folks. Can you see why his work has been so devastating? Now, the antecedents for the current Meccan program, just look at it. We talked about this in the car yesterday. When you look at Mecca today, you notice they circumambulate 7 times going counterclockwise. Why did they do that? Because that's what they did in Jerusalem. Circumambulating 7 times going counterclockwise, not going clockwise. And why 7 times? Because of Jericho. That's why the Muslims do it today. Then what do they do next? They go 7 times between Marwa and Safa, running between these 2 mountains, they call them. Take a look at those mountains. They're only 20 feet high. A child can climb on them. Those are not mountains, and Hagar is not finding any water out of just rocks that are 20 feet high. Obviously, these are not the original Marwa and Safa. Where's the Zamzam well that she finally found water where it's only 30 feet away from the Kaaba? If she's in Mecca to begin with, and she's thrown out of Mecca by Abraham, she goes out into the desert, she can't just be 30 meters away. She has to be miles away, right? If she's looking for water, and she goes between 2 mountains, Marwa and Safa, finally after 7 times comes back, and there it's burbling out of the ground, and it's burbling so fast, she says, Zamzam, Zamzam, which means enough, stop. That's why the Zamzam well is there. That can't have been just next to the Kaaba. Because she's in Mecca then. She could go to any house from surrounding the Kaaba, knock on the door and say, can I have some water? See how stupid this sounds? So I tell this to Muslims, I said, this has nothing to do with the original model. This is nothing more than a facsimile. This is a model of the original one. So where is the original one? Just go to Jerusalem. Go to Mount Moriah. Where do you think the Dome of the Rock is sitting? That is where the Mahmad is going to return. That's why it was built by Abdul Malik, to return the Mahmad to the Dome of the Rock. That's why he built it there, to commemorate that event. That's why all the inscriptions are about the Mahmad. And then what is it? He builds it there because the Arabic name for Mount Moriah is Marwa. Look at Josephus. He refers to this in the 2nd century. When you go from Marwa, or Mount Moriah, you go down to the Kidron Valley, and you go back to Mount Scopus on the other side. Mount Scopus is Safa in Arabic. It's as simple as that. What Muslims are doing today, the Jews were doing earlier. They've just copied what the Jews have done, and they now put it down into Mecca, but they've made it much smaller. Now it's just a facsimile, much like we did in Las Vegas. You go to Las Vegas, there's an Eiffel Tower there, and over here there's a pyramid. Are those the original Eiffel Tower and the original pyramid? Please, folks, you know they're not. In the same way, you can't say the Marwa and Safa are the original. They're facsimiles. They're models of what the original was. You've got to go to Jerusalem, and it just makes my job so easy. Now, in conclusion, certainly someone, somewhere, at some time should have known about this city, yet no one anywhere, nor at any time has, proving that it has never existed at the time of Muhammad, nor during early Islam. So if Mecca did not exist, then what were you going to do with the Quran? Are you ready? Now we get into the juicy stuff. The Quran is my bread and butter. This is what I love the most. And I usually take quite a few hours on this. So I'm going to really have to go through this quick because I only have half an hour. What do the Muslims claim? The Muslims claim four things. They say that the Quran is uncreated. Now, it's not that they claim that. That's in the Quran itself. That's in chapter 85, verse 21 and 22. And then they say that the Quran was sent down to a man named Muhammad over between 610 and 632, that 22-year period. And then they say that the Quran is completed by Uthman in 652. So though Muhammad died in 632, there was no Quran written down. That had to be first written down at the time of Abu Bakr in 632 to 634, and then rewritten down a second time under the time of Uthman, because there had been lots of corruptions that came into it in that intervening 20 years at the time. So 652. And then that Quran that Uthman created and sent out to 5 different cities, to Mecca, Medina, Basra, Hira, which is Baghdad, and up to Damascus. That Quran has never changed. Not one word, not one letter. You've heard Muslims say that? They're still saying that, aren't they? Well, they're no longer saying that because of what we did back in 2016, but more of that later. So it's unchanged for 1400 years. Now, can you memorize those 4 words? Uncreated, sent down, completed, unchanged. Can you memorize that for at least 20 more minutes? Because I'm going to come back to those 4 words. All right? So that's the claims. Oh, here they're going to make that claim. Oh, we don't have any sound. Steve, can we get any sound? Let's do this again. I'll start again. Okay, now these are my friends. Every one of the you see on this are people that I've engaged with. This is Adnan Rashid. You'll see all the guys from Speaker's Corner. You'll see Yusuf Qadi, who I've engaged with.
The Muslims have been for the last 14 centuries, and the Quran is absolutely word by word preserved. Word by word. You know, as you said, let's just. No! What? The Quran has been preserved to the mental, the God, and the sound. When you talk about it.
This is 100%. The Quran shall remain uncorrupted, untouched, and unchallenged until the day of judgment.
And the giving is exactly the one that was given to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Word for word, letter by letter, service
was revealed to the Prophet and preserved word by word, letter by letter, even the pronunciation.
I think the only person that got the joke was Mark. He's the only one that picked that up because he's the joker amongst us. I'm not going to tell you what the joke is, but ask Mark, he'll tell you later. So can you notice they're all saying the same thing? Did you notice that? Why do they make these claims? Mainly because the Quran makes these claims. They don't have a choice. In chapter 85, verse 21 to 22, this is the preserved tablets. Every tafsir will tell you that this means it is uncreated. It has never been touched. It has always coexisted with Allah eternally. That's chapter 85. In chapter 10, verse 15, also in chapter 18, verse 27, it says that no one can change a word of it. No man. If it's uncreated, how can any man change it? And the reason why is because chapter 15, verse 9, Allah preserves it. Allah preserves it. That's the reason why. So don't blame the Muslims for making these claims. They have no other choice. The Quran ties them on this. Don't take pictures of the screen. You're going to get the PowerPoint. You can have it later on. So we would not make these claims, folks. Please don't make the same claims. We do not believe the Bible is uncreated. Of course it was created. We know who created it. We know who wrote it. We know the names of the people that wrote it. We put their names on many of the books. We even know when they wrote it. We would not say that it was sent down. No, it was written by men on earth. Inspired by the Holy Spirit, yes. And we brought that up last day, remember, at the mosque. That came out. How is it that that this is not sent down? It was inspired. Not that it comes from heaven itself. And the Bible was complete. And we would agree with them that the Bible was complete at one time, but we don't have those originals. Please don't say we have those originals. You're going to tie yourself. Because we know that the Bible has been changed. Now, this is a huge debate within Christianity. I'm not going to get into that debate today, but there are about 40 verses that are in doubt. The latter part of Mark, John chapter 7, verse 52 to John chapter 8, verse 11. I'm not going to get into that debate. I'll let you guys do that debate. Nonetheless, if you're going to say it's never been changed, you're going to have a hard time supporting that with manuscript evidence. So we would never make those four claims. So today, all I want to do, since we don't make those four claims, we don't therefore have to defend those four claims. They do. And because they do, you can hang them on any one of those four claims. I can't really confront eternality, and I can't confront 7th century completeness because I'm not in the 7th century, nor do I understand eternality. But what I can do is the last two claims. I can confront the fact that it is unchanged and that it was complete. Those two I can confront. So what I'm going to demand of any Muslim, since they make those claims, I would demand them, and you can do the same thing. If you really believe the Quran comes from Muhammad, from this eternal tablet, then you need to provide one complete manuscript. That's 114 surahs that comes from the mid-7th century, that's 652, the time of Uthman, that is all complete, just like the Quran we have today, unchanged. So open up your Quran and just look at the Arabic. It has to be word for word the same as the Quran that we have in my hand today. All right? That's what they're claiming. Therefore, that's what they have to defend. So where do we go to find about the Quran's creation? Well, we need to go to Al-Sahih Bukhari. And you know that Sahih Bukhari, as you know, that we don't have any extant manuscripts for Sahih Bukhari until the 14th and 15th century. So that's a good 800 to 900 years later. Nonetheless, he is the one that tells us how the Quran is put together. It's in chapter 6, volume 6, hadith number 509 and 510 of his hadith. And what he says is very simply that it was sent down to Muhammad over that period, and that he was the one that put it together between 610 and 632. So that's 218 to 338 years later. I will have to change that slide. I see that's way too late. I should put actually 800 to 900 years later. Nonetheless, what he says is this. According to what Bukhari says, is that Uthman is the one that took the Quran that had been given to the one that had first had been written on the time of Abu Bakr and given to one of Muhammad's wives named Hafsa in 634. And she curiously put it under her bed and left it there. If this is the only revelation, the first one written down, the greatest revelation in the history of mankind, why do you stick it under your bed? That's the first question I'd like to ask. And she left it there for 20 years. We jump to 652, and this is the time of Uthman. There have been two other caliphs that have come in between, and Uthman now is there. He sent a delegation up to Azerbaijan to do a war up there, and there are a lot of Muslims come from Damascus, and they come from Iraq, and they join those who come from Medina. And at the end of the battle, which they win, they go to a mosque to pray. And as they're listening to these other Muslims praying, they notice that they're saying different words. It's not the same Quran, and so they start coming to blows and start beating each other up. Udaifa, who's in charge of all the Medinans, comes piddling them back down to Medina, and he talks to Uthman. He says, "What are we going to do? We heard many different Qurans up there." So he says, "Well, go wake up Hafsa, get her Quran that's underneath her bed, and give it to Zayd ibn Thabit, who is the secretary of Muhammad, to then rewrite the Quran that he had already originally written 20 years earlier, to rewrite it in the Qurayshi dialect. So it's only in one dialect." Now, those who are Arabic speakers, do you see a problem there? How do you write it in a dialectical form if there are no vowels or no dots? Do you see a difficulty right away? You can't have a dialectical difference. In order to have a dialectical difference means you say potato, we say potato, you have to have vowelization. There were no vowels in the 7th century. We got through that one yesterday, right? So already you're seeing there's a problem with this story. And the reason why is this has been by Al-Bukhari in the 15th century. In the 15th century, there was vowelization and there was all kinds of dottings. The 5 dots had been created by that time. So he's redacting it back onto the 7th century without knowing his history. Shame on him. That's why we can hang them on this. Nonetheless, he says, rewrite it in the Qurayshi dialect, and then he burns all the other dialects. That came up in yesterday, didn't it? And they said, oh yeah, but there were 7 ahruf that he didn't burn. And these 7 ahruf, which already is admitting that there's 7 different dialectical differences, these 7 ahruf are nothing more than pronunciation differences. And our good friend over here, Terence, had his Hafs and his wash. Folks, you need to get a Hafs and wash and let Terence walk you through it. Terence is going to be our expert in Minneapolis, all right? We're going to give you, and if you want to get a Hafs and the wash, George, are you here? George will get him for you. George, he's never here whenever I talk. He always runs away. I love George, but he never knows a thing I say. So go to Terrence. We're going to have him do some workshops for you here because you need to learn how to do this. Terrence did an amazing job yesterday, and the Muslims just surrounded him. They got so infuriated. They said, we're going to see you. We want to go and get our experts to come and get this out. And good old Terrence said, okay, here's my phone number. So he's given the phone number, and they're going to have dinner together, and he's going to actually walk them through the differences. And once you show the differences, this has nothing to do with pronunciation. It has nothing to do with you say potato, I say potato, you say katala, which means katala, which means he lived, and you others say it's kutala, which means he's dead. Does a prophet live or does he die? Well, if I'm a prophet, I like to live, thank you. So there you can see this changes the meaning completely. And so we're going to show them that this, you cannot deal with this if this is an eternal Quran. So what these five, what Uthman did, he sent 5 copies to 5 different cities. One was left there in Medina, one was sent to Mecca, one was sent to Basra, and one was sent up to Hira, which is Baghdad, and then one was sent to Damascus. Now, the question you need to ask is, where are they? Because that's only 1,400 years ago. Do you see what's our problem? We don't have not one of those manuscripts do we have today. And the Muslims agree with that. They know that there not one exists today. None of those 5 manuscripts exist. That's only 1,400 years ago. Shame on them for losing them or the ineptness. Now, what we do know is that almost at the end of the 7th century, suddenly other Qurans start to appear. So you have one coming out of Damascus written by Ubay ibn Ka'b, which has 116 surahs. That's 2 more surahs than in the Quran today. Another appears down in Baghdad, written by Ibn Masud, and that has 110 surahs. That's 4 less than in the Quran we have today. Another appears in Basra, written by Ibn Musa, and it has 114 surahs. But Dr. Arthur Jeffries looked at just the traditions coming out of Al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, Ibn Dawud, and Tirmidhi, and looking at all of the what they say about these different Qurans, he came up with 15,000 differences. He did that in 1936. This has been known for almost 100 years. 15,000 differences between these 4 Qurans. Folks, that's how bad it is. And then, of course, you have Zayd ibn Thabit's Quran, which became the official one there in Mecca and Medina. So there were at least 5 Qurans in the 7th century from Medina, Mecca, Basra, Kufa, and Damascus. We don't even have one of them today. Not one of them has been retained. But something happened in the 7th century, in the 8th century. The qira'ats start to appear. At the end of the 7th century, it was a problem. So what exactly is a qira'at? When you look at the Quran, when you look at the manuscripts, take a look at those manuscripts that I'm putting up there on the right side. Notice they have no dots above them. So how do you read them? Does anybody read Arabic here? Can you read those manuscripts there, Issa? You have to kind of guess what you're reading, right? And maybe if you look at the context, if you had memorized it, you would know the context. But here's the problem. You can't read those. Now, those are manuscripts of the Quran. There's 6 major manuscripts of the Quran. We have the Topkapi, which is in, and I'll get into that, so let's hold on to that. But the ones you're looking at, there's the Samarkand, the Sana, and the Topkapi. Those are 3 of the 6 manuscripts. Not one of them has diacritical marks except the Topkapi. It's starting to get diacritical marks, but they're not standardized, and they're all written in a red ink, which means they were put in at a later date. Every one of those Qurans that we have are from the 8th and 9th century, not one's from the 7th century. What's interesting is because of the fact that you couldn't read those manuscripts, they had to do something about it. And so immediately they started adding 5 dots. So 1 dot above is a noon, 2 dots above is a ta, 3 dots above is a tha, 1 dot below is a b or ba, and 2 dots is ya. So not ta, tha, ba, ya were added sometime in the 8th and the 9th century. Here you can see the manuscripts a little more clearly. Can you see dots? No. Do you see any dhamma or fatha or kasra? No, the 3 vowels aren't there as well. So that's what Arabic looks like today, 28 letters. Now, there are 6 letters that don't require dots. The alif, the kaf, the lam, the mim, the nu, the ha, and the waw. Those don't require any dots. The other 22 do. So that means those 22 have been invented since the time of the 7th century. In the 7th century, there were only 16 letters. So you put 1 dot above it, becomes a na, another becomes a ta, and 2 dots above, 3 dots becomes a tha, 1 below ba, and then ya, na, ta, tha, ba, ya, okay? Now you have 5 dots. If you go look at the vowelization, then you have the Dhamma, Kasra, and the Fatha. The Dhamma is a U sound, the Kasra is a E sound, and the Fatha is a A sound. When you start putting these together in words, and remember, most every Arabic word always has 3 letters. Let's just take 3 smiley faces that I showed you where the dots are, and put 3 smiley faces together. You can get 19 different words just by putting dots and vowels in different places. So, your name is, I'm going to call you Hafs, right? Your name is Hafs. I mean, just for now. and you live in Kufa, and you decide to put your dots and vowels where you want to, right? Your name is Warsh, and you live in Cairo, and you decide to put your dots and vowels where you want to. You don't know this guy. You don't care about this guy. You have a whole following of students underneath you. Your name is, let's put your name Kalun, and you live also in Kufa, but you don't get to know him. You put your dots and vowels where you want to, right? Your name is Ibn Kathir, and you live in Mecca, and you put your dots and vowels where you want to. And suddenly every one of you, in fact, everybody in this room decides you're living in 6 different cities in Mecca or Medina or Basra or Kufa or Damascus or Cairo, 6 different cities. All of you live in those 6 cities, and you are all putting your dots where you want to. You all start your own schools to people to memorize your Qurans, and you have hundreds of students, right? Do you see a problem? None of you are looking at each other's Qurans, so you come up with completely different Qurans, right? So by the 10th century, this caused a dilemma. And therefore, they needed to do something about it. So a guy named Ibn Mujahid was asked to look at these. How many Qurans existed in the 7th century? In the 10th century? 700 different Qurans. I kid you not. You've not heard this before? There were 700 different Qurans by the 10th century, all from these 6 cities, all from schools that were started all through these 6 cities with students who were memorizing 700 different ways of reading the Quran with all the dots in different places and the vowels where they wanted to be. So Ibn Mujahid was given the responsibility to choose 7 of them. And these are the ahruf, Terence, they were talking about yesterday. Notice the 7 that you see up on the screen there? You notice we have 3 from Kufa, 1 from Damascus, 1 from Basra, 1 from Mecca, and 1 from Medina. So it looks like Kufa is really the major place. That's Iraq. That's Baghdad. All right? Notice the dates of when they died. 785, 738, 770, 736, 745, 772, and 805. Did any of those men know Muhammad? Were any of them listening to Muhammad? Remember they said yesterday, Terence, these guys were right there. They were listening to Muhammad, and they heard the 7 different ahruf, and these are the 7 ahruf. This is the 7 men that got 7 different dialects that were received from Gabriel, because Muhammad said, people don't understand what I'm saying. He said, give me 7 different dialects. These are the 7 men. Look at their dates. No one's put their dates. I'm the first to put their dates up there because no one wants to see those dates. These don't even begin to appear for 130 years after Muhammad. Ooh, but notice what's missing up there. What are the 2 ones we need? Yours and yours. Yours isn't up there. Do you see your name up there? And yours is memorized by 93% of the world's population today, of the Muslim world's population. 93%. If you look at all your Qurans that you have, I know you all have your Qurans on you. You always bring it to go. Oh, none of you have your Qurans on you. Well, if you did, when you go home, it's a Hafs, which is this guy right here. Yours is memorized by all the people in North Africa. That's 3% of the Muslim world. Memorize yours. Yet your Quran's not up there. Do you see it? So this caused a problem. By the 12th century, in 1194, a man named Al-Shatibi was given the responsibility to take 2 students from every one of these 7 and choose them. Now, every one of these 7, some of them, like you have Asim ibn al-Najud, Asim had 91 students, and they had to choose 2 from every one of those 7 students. What did they use as their criteria for choosing what they were going to use? Anybody know? They looked to see which of the teachers had the most students. Popularity. It had to do with popularity. It had nothing to do with looking at one word or one letter. They just used popularity. So they choose 2 from every one of those. These are the ones that were chosen by Al-Shatibi. And notice now your name appears, and so does your name. You see him right up there? Warsh and Hafs. There's Warsh up there, and here's Hafs down here. But look when you died. You died in 796, and you died in 812. Did you know Muhammad? Did you ever hear Muhammad receive this or recite these? You didn't, did you? So now we have 7 plus 14. How many do we have? 21 different Qurans. Folks, that still wasn't good enough. A man named Al-Jaziri in the 15th century, in 1429, that's when he died, had to choose another Kirat, and then from every one of those Kirat, he had to choose 2 students, Rawayats they call them. So now you have another 9 on top of the earlier 21. So 7 plus 14 plus 3 plus 6. How many Qurans do you have now by the 15th century? 30 different Qurans. 30 different Qurans. Hafs was the one that was chosen in 1985 by the government. Actually, was chosen in Egypt in 1924, because they had so many students coming and doing standardized tests, and they were coming up with 30 different answers that they had to go to a man named Al-Haddad, Muhammad Al-Haddad, Al-Huwaini Al-Haddad, there at Al-Azhar University in Cairo to choose just one of them, and he chose yours. Thank God he chose yours, because the other 29 he took out into a boat and they dumped into the Nile, thinking that got rid of them. That was in 1924. Little did they realize that people were still memorizing them all over the Muslim world. You can buy all 30 of them still today. My colleague Hatun Tosh has bought all 30 of them. In fact, she's bought 37, because between 1924 and 1936, they had to keep revising yours because yours had so many mistakes in it. They revised it 7